The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the Churchville Schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the Civil War era. Students of today walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm of the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville Schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons. And children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are practiced, and students test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, no school day is complete without recess featuring games of the early 1900s. The schoolhouse is a popular place for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can also be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History program is operated by the Elmhurst Historical Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information. Call 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. The Churchville Schoolhouse is waiting to open the doors for your school or community group. Plan a memorable learning experience today for the best education in history.
Welcome to Elmhurst TimeTravelers. We're at the historic Churchville one-room schoolhouse, and we're here to do another program on local Elmhurst history. I'm Ken Bartels, your host, and today we're visiting with two representatives of the Theater Historical Society of America, which is located in downtown Elmhurst, and we'll hear more about that in a minute. We have Rick Fosbrink, the Executive Director, and Amanda Wick, the Archival Director. Welcome to Elmhurst TimeTravelers, and welcome to the Churchville one-room schoolhouse. I understand, actually, before we went on camera, I know neither of you have been here before, so it's a great place, and we enjoy doing our programs from here. As a way to start out for our audience, if you both would share your roles, I did your titles, but your roles at the Theater Historical Society and your backgrounds, educational, work, what have you. Rick, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm Rick Fosbrink, the Executive Director of Theater Historical Society of America. I've been here in Elmhurst for about a year and a half. This June will be 2 years. Before I took the job at THS, I was living in Detroit. I got my master's degree at Wayne State University in Arts Administration. And before that, I was working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. I was a teacher, a high school teacher, and chaired performing arts department, taught music and theater. And I'm the executive director, so I'm kind of the guy in charge on a daily basis.
Well awarded theater, as I recall reading when you came to town.
Yeah, I've had a few acknowledgments of my work.
Excellent. Amanda?
Well, as you mentioned, my name is Amanda Wick. I'm the Archives Director at the Theater Historical Society. I'm actually pretty new to the organization. I just started in December. I received a Bachelor of Arts from Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, and I got my library degree at Dominican University just out in River Forest. I have been working primarily with performing arts collections throughout my archives career. working with organizations in Northbrook on dance collections a lot. So it's been really exciting for me to move from the world of the performers to the theater itself.
Okay. The Theater Arts Society of America, for our viewers, many of whom will know about it, a whole bunch that probably don't. Its mission is broadly defined as?
Well, we exist to archive and document the architectural, cultural, and social history of theaters in America. So that's pretty broad. One of the big programs that we have clearly is the archive, and a lot of the information there surrounds the architectural history of theaters. But we do encompass all theaters, so we're interested in movie theaters and live action theaters, amphitheaters, drive-ins, anything that was used for some sort of stage or film exhibition.
And when did this first come about?
Right.
And I guess why did it first come about? And then please, either one of you that feels comfortable,
Right.
When,
Well,
I guess, would be the first question.
We were founded in 1969.
Okay.
So we've been around for a few years. We're getting ready to celebrate our 50th anniversary in a few years. We were actually started by a gentleman who was an editor for Life magazine in New York. His name was Ben Hall. And he had written a book called The Best Remaining Seats, and it was about the fact that these big movie palaces were being torn down all over the United States. So in the process of him collecting information to write this book, he ran into people all over the country that had some story to tell about movie theaters. And so he kind of, I guess, amassed a group of friends that were all interested in theaters. And he sort of was the founder, but there were other people that were out there on the periphery that really helped hold everything together. We joke that we should probably give an award to the Catholic Church because one of our founding members was Brother Andrew Corsini, and he was from the Holy Ghost Brothers there at Notre Dame. And so because he had a job within the church that allowed him to do some work in the morning and some work in the evening, kind of had all day free. So he was the first person that published our magazines. So, you know, we've got lots of different stories like that of people that helped put the organization together. But Ben is the person that we regard as our founder because he's pretty well known in the theater circles.
Anything magical about 1969, or that's just when it happened? Was there anything going on that might have precipitated that action?
Well, I think that it's kind of that's just when it was, but I think
Okay.
the precipitating action that caused Ben to want to write the book and the organization started was because they were tearing down the Roxy Theater in New York City, which was one of his favorite places, and the Life magazine headquarters was right beside the Roxy. And the stories are that Ben used to slip a little money to the doorman as they were about to tear down the building, and he went in and liberated some of the things that were going to be destroyed in the demolition. But at that point in time, Ben was the guy that staged the photograph of Gloria Swanson in the Roxy rubble as it was being torn down. It's a pretty iconic photo. But Ben was the person that staged that for Life magazine.
Now, was that about the time that the massive 10, 15, 23 theater screen palaces, so to speak, were starting to become the norm, or did that happen later?
Well, that happened a little bit later, actually.
Okay. So that wasn't the reason. It
No.
was
No,
just,
no.
we were losing some iconic
I think
places
that-
and
Yeah, I think that would be fair to say. We were losing these iconic movie palaces that meant so much to so many communities. They were, the main outlet for creative expression, and they were also the main gathering place for so many communities. And even today, I get a lot of phone calls from people who are interested in saving the historic theater in their town, and they come to us for information and for resources. With regards to Ben Hall's work, his work on the Roxy, I think, is pivotal to our organization, and actually his research and his personal belongings and the stuff that he liberated from the Roxy actually are the foundations of our archives today.
And when you talk, you're talking sort of about, was this the beginning of the period, or maybe the beginning of the end of these big, movie theaters in communities? Specifically when it comes to film theaters, technology plays such an integral part in the demise of them and the change of the business. As Amanda said, the theaters were really the cultural gathering places, and in the 1920s and 30s, I mean, that's where you went for entertainment and to see a newsreel. And as
and
TV,
to cool off on a hot night.
Exactly.
Sure.
Well, healthfully air conditioned,
Exactly.
was
Yeah.
very important.
Right.
But as technology changed and then TV became more prevalent, of course, we didn't need 4,000 seat movie theaters anymore,
Right.
and the big dinosaurs became a tad bit obsolete, and then we get into the multiplex period. So I think that 1969 was probably it was around the time where they were acknowledging that the past and the glory days of the 30s and 40s was swiftly going away.
Well, now I know, as I mentioned, you're located in downtown Elmhurst. You're above the York Theater. The entranceway is just to the right of the marquee, so to speak, and you go up the stairs. How long have you been in the York Theater?
We have been there since 1992. Before that, really in the early days of THS, a lot of the collection items existed in the Brothers' house because Brother Andrew Corsini had room in the Brothers' house, so he started filling up unused rooms until he got transferred, and they said, hey, you guys got to get this stuff out of here. A lot of things then got moved to Chicago. We rented some space in a church basement on North Avenue, and then there were some flooding issues in that building, and Willis and Shirley Johnson had purchased the York Theater, and they said, well, why don't you move out here to Elmhurst? So we moved in '92.
Okay. And what is in the York Theater? You've mentioned archives, obviously workspace, but what exactly I know there was, quote unquote, a museum up there for a time.
Right.
But when someone comes to visit you to do research, or what do they encounter?
Well, as Rick may have mentioned, we went through some pretty extreme renovations, I guess, back last summer. And so the original museum space has kind of been absorbed into workspace and actually storage for the archives itself. We still do have an exhibit space, and in fact, right now, our exhibit that we have up is based on our upcoming conclave event in Pittsburgh. So all of the items that you'll see on display are related to Pittsburgh's theaters and the evolution of the Arts and Culture District in Pittsburgh. For the most part, we do get some people that come in to visit us and view the exhibits. But more and more often, we have people who come in to do either research for academic reasons or just for personal interest. And for that, they usually call ahead and we schedule time for them to come in, and we pull out materials that are related to, whatever they might be interested in, be it a specific theater from their childhood, where we pull out photos, or it could be much more academic focused. Today we actually had somebody in who is doing research on the Uptown Theater in Chicago and how the theater itself played an enormous role in the economic stability, actually, of that neighborhood.
Well, we've already mentioned Willis and Shirley Johnson a couple times, and we'll probably mention them again before we're finished, I'm sure. But the owners of the York Theater, Tivoli Incorporated, did the Johnsons find THS, or did THS find the Johnsons? Do you know?
I don't know if I really know the answer to the question. I think that they've been so
We're
intertwined.
just glad they did, right?
Oh yeah, I think that they've been so intertwined for so long that I would probably have to perhaps go to Willis and Shirley personally and ask them. Shirley for a long time was the secretary of THS, and one of our very important founding members and longtime presidents was Joe Dusabella. And Joe was actually the decorator that did a lot of the interiors of Willis and Shirley's theaters. So they've all known each other for a long time.
Sure.
So I don't know who found who first, but we're very lucky that we found each other.
Now, it is the national organization. It's Theater Historical Society of America.
Correct.
So, how many members do you have? How does one become a member, and what's involved with that?
We have around 800 members. we have, over the years gone up and down. We have members in all 50 states. We have members from England and Australia and France and Germany, and there are members outside of the United States, which is great. Membership dues are $60. It's not hard to become a member. You can go to our website and join online. Some of the benefits of that are clearly supporting our mission and documenting these things and preserving the archives, but we also publish a magazine called Marquee that we've been publishing since 1969. That comes out 5 times a year. And then we do events. We have a big event coming up in June in Pittsburgh, as Amanda mentioned, where we tour theaters for a week. We also have an event coming up in August in Wisconsin at the Basement Bijou. One of our members actually took the pipe organ out of the Michigan Theater in Detroit and installed it in his basement and built a theater all around it. So we're going to take folks up there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was actually on CBS Sunday Morning a few months back.
Who's a typical member?
We have actually, our membership is a wide swath of the population. So we've got folks that are hobbyists. So they want to look at our magazine and remember the days when they, enjoyed going to the movies all day Saturday for, 25 cents, or that they may have been an usher in the 50s or 60s. And then we've got professionals, we've got architects, designers. We do a lot of work in terms of the archive work of providing resources for architects and designers and companies that do restoration of theaters, because they'll come to us for blueprints or pictures of theaters. So we've got really a broad sampling of people that are members.
From a archival perspective, Amanda, what constitutes the archives? You mentioned, obviously, is it primarily at this point print? Is it what's in your archives?
Well,
Simple question. A lot.
A lot of stuff. Our archive is pretty interesting. There are, several hundred linear feet, I would say, of actual materials, and they could be objects. We have a lot of terracotta from theaters that have been actually torn down. We have original theater drapery from some of the, I want to say we have things from the Granada Theater in Chicago. We have their original drapery.
Lots of stuff from the Granada Theater.
We have a lot. We have theater chairs, rows and rows of chairs. We also have architectural blueprints, and I would say we have the blueprints for probably 500 theaters, including a number of very famous ones in Chicago and in New York City. We also have an amazing photography collection that spans probably from the early 1900s all the way through today. And many of those pictures were taken by, architectural photographers, while others were taken by members who were on a road trip and decided to take photos of all their theaters, and then they send us their collections. So we have a lot of really fun collections of people taking pictures out the side of their window of their car. So you see a rearview mirror, and it's kind of cool. And then we have paper records as well, the operational records of a number of different theater chains. It really runs the gamut, and it covers everything from architecture to, the operational and the social aspects of the theater itself.
Plus, we've got scrapbook collections. One of them that I find to be most interesting was one of our founding members. His name was Terry Helgeson. He was a vaudeville pianist, and he made scrapbooks at every theater that he went to. So there are 30 scrapbooks or so.
36.
And then plus we have an artwork collection. A lot of that is composed of the architectural paintings or renderings of theaters that probably came from the architect's studios. One of the most important ones we have is of the Roxy that was saved from the building before it was torn down.
Well, I think it's so interesting because as we talk about what's in the archives and the, if you will, the scope and sphere of the organization, you just mentioned the piano, and there was a longtime resident of Elmhurst by the name of John Watson. He has been deceased now for a number of years, but that was his occupation before he retired. He played piano for silent movies all over the Chicagoland area, and I met him early in my time in the city, and it was just fascinating to listen to him interpret some classic silent movies, and what he was playing. In fact, he would do a program. He went around town and would show a silent movie and then provide the accompaniment. That's another whole side to the theater thing, and the pipe organs would be another.
Well, that's actually another program we've been working on for the last year or so, is the oral history program of recording those stories of people that have some story to tell about their life in the theater, and we want to try and document those as much as possible too.
What's your average visitor looking for?
I would say our average visitor as of right now is really after personal interest. So the walk-in visitors are looking for usually photographs of theaters that they used to go to, be it a performing arts venue or a movie theater. I would say one of the most common requests that we get, though, outside of people coming in and asking for photos, are requests from architectural firms who are interested in doing restoration work, or organizations that are working to save a historic theater and get it landmarked.
What did it look like before?
Yeah, and so we have, as I mentioned, probably over 500, we have blueprints for over 500 theaters, and quite often we have what people are looking for, and it's just a matter of getting them the plans themselves. So it's pretty exciting when I get to work with those kinds of organizations.
Metropolitan Chicago, are we doing a better job of preserving historical theaters, a better job than perhaps other areas of the country, or not as good, or what do you think?
I would say we're doing a very good job at it. Clearly Chicago is a town that has a history of being known for theater, and there are lots of theaters here in Chicago that are being preserved. There are clearly lots that have been torn down too, but Chicago is a place where there is actually enough money that structures can be saved. It's a much harder thing to save a theater that's in a small town because you just don't have the financial resources to do it. And then, of course, you have to have the business. And the business is always the hard part, because if you've got one single screen theater with 1,200 seats, very difficult to compete with the multiplex that has 22 screens and the arcade and all of the food and everything else that goes along with modern movie business.
We'll come back and talk further about the modern movie business. We need to take a short break. This is Elmhurst Time Travelers. We're talking with Rick Fosbrink and Amanda Wick from the Theater Historical Society of America, located right in the Elmhurst downtown. We'll be right back.
Visit elmhurst.org to explore the new City of Elmhurst website. Find out the latest Elmhurst news, pay utility bills and parking tickets, report concerns, and much more. Elmhurst.org is an ideal way to discover what Elmhurst offers your business, your family, your life.
The Elmhurst Historical Museum, located in downtown Elmhurst, is proud to present award-winning exhibits for visitors of all ages. Our Adult Tea Time Talk series, family programs, and special events make learning about history interesting and fun. Admission is free, and on-site parking is available. Visit the Elmhurst Historical Museum soon. Call us today, or go to our website for the latest program details.
Welcome back. This is Elmhurst Time Travelers. I'm Ken Bartels, your host, and we're talking about the Theater Historical Society of America with Rick Fosbrink and Amanda Wick, representatives of that organization. And we've been talking about the archives, which are obviously an integral part of why the society exists. How do you grow your archives, and are you looking for particular things as opposed to perhaps some other things?
Well, it's really interesting. We do get donations probably almost on a daily basis. And it could be something as simple as a newspaper clipping or a magazine article. that a member might send in, or it could be something as surprising as a huge box of books, or a scale model of a theater. I really never know what's going to show up in my mailbox.
The UPS arrives and here it is.
Yeah, exactly. So there's those kinds of donations that aren't necessarily solicited, but are always welcome to the archive. And then we're also working to grow our archive, I would say, in a few specific ways. Right now we have a lot of information in our archive on the movie theaters and specifically the movie palaces, and we're looking to really expand and continue to grow our resources that we have on performing arts venues. So it's just, that's always an effort that we're looking for. And so, I would welcome any of our viewers who'd be interested in speaking with us about possibly making a donation, to please give us a call. And we're also typically on the lookout for collections that feed into beyond just architecture, the more social and cultural aspects and the role of the theater in a community. So that's something we're going after. Rick mentioned an oral history project, and I think that that's one of the ways that we're really seeking to get additional resources in this area.
Mm-hmm. And also we need to fill in things geographically, because clearly there are lots of theaters in larger metropolitan areas, but perhaps there might be a smaller suburban or rural area that had one movie theater or one live theater, and we're looking to fill in those places. And also things like in the American Midwest or Utah, Wyoming, we need to fill in the gaps in the collection from those states.
Well, it's pretty interesting, the just personal reference. My first memory of being in a movie theater was in the York Theater. I was born in Elmhurst, didn't grow up here, but it's the theater that my parents went to if they were going to the theater. Right. So I have this vague childhood memory of this. Growing up, I remember going to the Coronado Theater in Rockford, which I don't think it was large enough to qualify as a palace, but it was pretty impressive to me, I know. And then moved into Elmhurst about the time the York was in a bad state, just prior to Willis and Shirley Johnson purchasing it. So I've got all these memories, and grew up in a small town where there was the one little tiny one screen theater that existed for a while, and then one day it just wasn't, and then it became a flea market, and it became any number of things, and then another day it wasn't there. So it's that's the memories that I suspect the two of you have as well. I mean, what's the first movie theater you remember being in?
Before I answer your question, though, interestingly enough, that's the sort of thing we're trying to tap into, because everybody has a story like that.
Sure.
Everybody wants to tell the story about the first movie theater they were ever in. As for me, I grew up in a rural area outside of Pittsburgh, actually. So I think the first movie theater I really remember being in was probably the strip mall type, multiplex. But it only had 4 theaters in it because it was, small area. But when we would go to downtown Pittsburgh, we had, the big movie theaters there had been turned into performing arts centers. So, it was the Lowe's Penn Theater in downtown Pittsburgh. It's now Heinz Hall. That's where the Pittsburgh Symphony plays. And the Benedum Center, one block over, was the Stanley Theater. And it's now where the big Broadway touring shows come in. So for me, my personal affinity is for these movie palaces of the 20s and 30s that have since gone on to live a second life, being turned into live performance theaters, where they sort of build a giant massive stage house on the back and the loading dock so that the Broadway shows can come in.
That is a fascinating spin, because I mean, many of the Chicago venues have that pedigree and history. Is Elmhurst a good location for your organization? I mean, we know you've got a wonderful landlord, but I mean, is it a good location for your organization?
Well, First of all, I live in Elmhurst too, so I love it. I can walk down to the office, and city center is gorgeous. And, you know, I'm always shocked coming from Detroit before I moved here. You know, when I see a line of people waiting to get into the York and see people going in and out of the restaurants and the bank and everything else that's downtown Elmhurst, it's exciting for me. So I love Elmhurst. I think that this is a good place for us to be for our sense of community and working with other organizations, and it's just a lovely little town. But the building presents some challenges for us. We have done some renovation work, but being on the second floor above the theater without having an elevator or any sort of handicapped accessibility, we're also sort of locked into the amount of space that we have. I mean, it presents some challenges. But, you know, the Johnsons are wonderful to us, and they've worked through some of these issues with us and helped with our renovation plans. So, I mean, it is a good place for us.
Mm-hmm. And location-wise, I would agree with that. I mean, we are very close to Chicago. That does have a strong theater tradition. You know, and something we were talking about earlier struck me is that a lot of cities and towns within the Chicagoland area, I think, really do have a strong tradition of trying to save their historic theaters. And I think Elmhurst with the York is just a wonderful example of that.
I want to step back for a second to the organization itself. How are you governed? What's the governance structure for THS?
Well, we have a board of directors, and they come from all over the United States and Canada. As the executive director, I'm kind of the CEO in charge on a daily basis sort of thing, but we do have a board governance structure. And we're also really, truly a membership organization. You know, the membership actually votes for the directors that sit on the board.
Sure.
But we are governed by a board. But on a daily basis, we sort of run things in the office.
How large a board? How often do you meet?
We have 14 spots open on our board. We're a little light now. I think we have 11 people on the board. We elect new members to the board every year, so we'll be putting some more people on in June. We have been meeting twice a year, but we're going to start meeting 3 times a year with the board because we are rapidly expanding and growing.
Okay. Now, a typical board meeting will obviously have all the typical board meeting things,
Right.
But have you gone out on site visits and related, unrelated? I'm interested in how the Pittsburgh event came into being.
Yeah, well, we do that every year. We've been doing that theater tour every year for 40-some years now, I think.
Okay, and this is Pittsburgh's turn.
It's Pittsburgh's turn. We've never been to Pittsburgh before.
Okay.
I think this was, when I got hired for the organization, I think the board thought, well, let's say we're going to Pittsburgh since it's his hometown, you know.
It worked.
It worked. So, we're going to Pittsburgh this summer, but we have done the event every year, and it is tied into us having a board meeting. So we have a board meeting on like Tuesday morning, and then we start the activities Tuesday afternoon, and then we tour theaters every day until Saturday, and then we have a banquet at the end of the week. And we get attendees that come religiously from England, Australia, and Ireland, plus all over the United States and Canada. We usually get between 100 and 225 people will come to this event.
So where were you last year?
Last year we were in upstate New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Sometimes we take long bus rides too.
I was going to say, there's probably a little distance between. I mean, you know, New York after you get out of the metropolitan area is there's a little traveling distance there. You mentioned the challenges of the space that you're in, and I guess broadly defined, what kind of challenges do you face as an organization that short term? We'll go long term, but short term challenges.
Well, short term challenges are it's hard to fund an organization that inherently has a base of membership that are there for nostalgic reasons. So, you know, if people want to, you know, or people are there that have a remembrance of being in a movie theater in the 1930s, a lot of those folks aren't with us anymore. So we have to shift what we're doing a bit so that we're more focused on education and less focused on what was your story of being an usher in the 1930s.
Okay. Okay, in that sense, and in that sense
Right.
only, typical to what the Holocaust Museum is facing with
Right.
the rapid end of survivors
Right.
to talk about and share their stories. Pretty soon there will be no one who can actually share such stories.
And that's why it's important for us to do the oral history project
Absolutely.
to preserve those stories. But one of the organizations that we sort of look to and say, we have to understand that this happens. It's not just happening to us, it happens all through history. The Grand Army of the Republic was an organization that was all about Civil War soldiers. And they chose to not sort of turn into a historic organization, and they wanted to exist just for Civil War soldiers. So when the last Civil War veteran died, the organization went away.
Sure.
So in long term, that's exactly what we don't want to have happen. Since we are really the guardians of all of this theater history information, we don't want it to go away. So we do have to shift our focus a little bit.
Well, I mean, Elmhurst Time Travelers was created to be a video/oral history attempting to capture things of significance within Elmhurst. So I certainly take your point. Longer term challenges, or do they sort of just dovetail
I
together?
think they dovetail together, but also a long-term challenge is how do you get people interested in historic theaters? I mean, I'm a perfect example where I didn't grow up going to a movie palace. I went to a strip mall type movie theater because that's what I understood. How do you get people interested in the historic past? I think that's a problem that all historic organizations have, whether it's a museum or an organization like ours.
Not only the interest in the historic past, but there's a small matter called funding.
Oh yeah.
Principally a membership organization, is that where your funding comes from to operate?
Membership dues and donations.
Okay.
We do have a small investment account that we had a generous bequest, and we invested that money. We've been making some gains with that account, but we haven't been utilizing it for operating. So
That's good.
It's good, but we have to make the decision.
Sure.
Are we going to sort of continue on the path of saying, hey, we're going to need that money someday, but maybe someday is now, or else we're going to be using it to keep the lights on someday. Not that I'm saying, we have a dark future or anything like that, but we just, you have to invest in the organization to grow it.
Well, and it's certainly no secret, arts organizations, they don't have all of the same cuddly stuff as some charitable organizations do. You don't have alumni.
Right.
You don't have a number of things, and so membership becomes important. Is there a fee if I come by tomorrow and say, really I do want to research that theater that's in my old hometown that isn't there anymore? Can you even tell me what the name of it was, because I don't remember? Do you nominally charge for things like that?
We actually no longer do. We don't charge for research. The things that we do charge for are reproduction of our photos.
Okay.
Sure. And if you want to publish them in a book, for students who are coming in to do research, they're absolutely welcome to use whatever they want in their papers and stuff, and we would never ever charge a student for that. But for the most part, yeah. I mean, our goal, and I guess my goal as an archivist, is really to make these materials accessible to people, and to get them into the right hands, and the hands of people who very much care about things. And so when it comes to historic theaters, as Rick mentioned, we all have a memory of some theater or another, if it was a first date or not. That's actually mine, I think. But it is kind of funny how we get people in there like that. And, we're just working to reach out to these people that, probably have more of an interest than they know about. So we would never ever charge somebody for that.
And you want to be, it strikes me, you don't want to be, you are the source. If there's an intrepid reporter at the Tribune who's doing a piece on X theater, you want them to call you, contact you, see what you have, be the expert source, the expert reference.
And we get a lot of that too. And over the years, we've worked with CBS News and the Wall Street Journal and PBS and, all major newspapers and books. And, we've got a decent history in that sense. We are also trying to get as much as possible digitized and accessible online. So we continue to add things on a daily basis, and you can go to our website, historictheaters.org, and actually do research through our website. You can search the collections that way.
Well, over my shoulder is a York Theater photograph, your home. What vintage is this photograph approximately, would you say?
It's from the 1930s, and it's actually kind of surprising because this is a massive support of Willis and Shirley for being able to restore the York to almost identical its condition at its inception. It truly is amazing to me, the work that they put into this and the investment that they made in the theater. But it is from the 1930s, and we have a number of photos that are usually probably opening day of major theaters. So like the Uptown Theater in Chicago, or the Aragon Ballroom very shortly after it opened, both interior and exterior. So this is, while certainly cool, we've got a lot of those.
Sure. Well, I associate the movie palaces with the day when the grand openings,
right,
the premiere nights, the spotlights going all over, and the actual stars of the movies showing up. And I know those things still happen, but we don't seem to hear about them anymore very much. Is that part of the archives too? Have you captured some of that?
It is. It's not perhaps not to as great of extent as I would love to see it, but we do have, especially for the Roxy in particular, we have the original press books that came out that Roxy himself, I think, created, that are just nothing but the newspaper clippings and photos of the documentation of the opening night and the run-up to opening. So it's actually pretty cool that I can look through the scrapbook that Roxy had on his desk at one point and see like all of the press that happened around the opening events. So yeah, we actually do have a good amount of that. Not as much as I'd like, perhaps.
I know you're interested in all kinds of theaters, and we're getting close to being done with our time together, but can you cite a theater not related to the movies that's of particular note, perhaps in this area or somewhere nearby? A classic non-movie place?
Well, I can think of a few that are repurposed movie palaces, so we're talking about like the Chicago Theater downtown, right, which is probably it's a really phenomenal example of how an architectural restoration can transition a building from the movie palace to a performing arts center. And I think it's it's definitely one of my favorites.
And I didn't grow up here, so I don't know as much around the area. But for me, and since we're going to Pittsburgh in the summer, there's a lot of places that are on our tour of Pittsburgh, like the Carnegie Music Halls that were part of the Andrew Carnegie Libraries. A lot of them were built in Pittsburgh and all over the country, but they all have music halls associated with them. Or places like Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall in Pittsburgh that we'll be going to that aren't movie theaters at all.
Okay. We've got about 1 minute. What would both of you like to share about the Theater Historical Society of America, located in Elmhurst, with our viewers as we end our time together?
Well, THS does important work. We're excited to be in Elmhurst, but we aren't focused on, Elmhurst. We are focused on the entire, United States of America. We've got exciting stuff for people to come and enjoy, and we want people to come and visit us. So if you've got time, you're going to see a movie at the York, come a little early and come upstairs and see us.
Website address is?
historictheaters.org.
Terrific. Amanda, Rick, thank you for joining me on Elmhurst Time Travelers.
Thanks. Thank you.
This has been another program, as I just said, of Elmhurst Time Travelers. Thank you for watching. We're always interested in program ideas, and if you have any, please give the Elmhurst Historical Museum a telephone call, and we'll be glad to follow up with you. For Elmhurst Time Travelers, I'm Ken Bartels. We'll see you again.
Hi, I'm John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In these challenging economic times, it's imperative that our residents and businesses band together to not only shop Elmhurst, but buy Elmhurst whenever possible. We have great stores in our city center, Spring Road, Butterfield Road, York and Villette Streets, St. Charles and Route 83, North Avenue and Lake Street, along North York and even Grand Avenue. I ask for your help. Let's keep our tax dollars in Elmhurst.